We fear being wrong because it forces us to race the parts of ourselves we try hardest to ignore.
What if I told you that our deepest fear isn't stupidity at all, but something far more terrifying? We don't truly fear looking foolish. We don't truly fear ignorance. What we fear, more than anything else, is being wrong. Because being wrong isn't just a mistake, it's a mirror that forces us to confront the fragile mask we wear before the world, the carefully constructed identity we call our ego. Carl Jung believed that the refusal to face this mirror is what chains us to illusions, keeping us from real growth. Stupidity can be dismissed as limitation, but being wrong? That reveals the hidden shadow we spend our entire lives trying to deny. And that's why it terrifies us more than ignorance ever could. If you're ready to uncover why we fear wrongness more than stupidity, subscribe now and let's journey deeper into Jung's warning together. Imagine standing in front of a locked door, knowing that behind it lies a truth about yourself you're terrified to face. Most people would rather turn away than search for the key. Carl Jung argued that ignorance itself isn't our greatest danger. It's our refusal to confront ignorance when it stares us in the eye. Ignorance can be temporary. It can be corrected with effort, with curiosity, with humility. But the refusal to confront it, that is willful blindness. That is the seed from which personal destruction and collective catastrophe grow. Think about this. When you don't know something, you're not yet guilty of failure. You're simply at the starting line of discovery. But when you actively avoid knowing, when you pretend, when you cover your ears to uncomfortable truths, you've chosen illusion over reality. Jung warned that this act of refusal is not neutral. It creates a shadow, a kind of psychic infection that festers in the unconscious. And like any infection, it spreads into your decisions, your relationships, your very sense of who you are. History offers us brutal lessons. Entire societies have collapsed, not because they lacked knowledge, but because they turned away from truths they couldn't bear to face. Jung himself saw this in his lifetime. Brilliant nations swept into mass psychosis, not through ignorance alone, but through denial. People knew, on some level, what was happening around them. They sensed the moral rot, the cruelty, the manipulation, but the truth was too heavy, too costly, too dangerous to confront, so they refused. And in that refusal, they surrendered their humanity, piece by piece. Now, let's make it personal. How many times in your own life have you felt that small, gnawing voice inside the whisper that something isn't quite right? Maybe in a relationship, a career choice, or even in your own beliefs. You sense the cracks, but you don't want to look. Why? Because to look would mean to act, to change, to confront the possibility that you've been mistaken. And so you bury it. You distract yourself. You tell yourself, it's fine. But in truth, every act of avoidance gives that shadow more power. Jung believed that refusing to confront ignorance is a betrayal of the self, a fracture that makes us strangers to our own soul. The real tragedy is this. Ignorance, once acknowledged, can become wisdom, but denial transforms ignorance into destiny. By refusing to confront what we don't know, we invite blindness to rule us. Jung challenged us to make a radical choice to face ignorance with courage rather than hide from it. Because the moment we confront what we don't know, we begin the journey of becoming fully human. So I'll ask you, what truths have you been avoiding? And how long will you let the refusal to confront them dictate your life? Picture the human ego as a carefully painted mask. It is the face we want the world to see, confident, consistent, admirable. But beneath that mask lies something far more complicated. Doubt, fear, contradiction, and vulnerability. Carl Jung understood that being wrong is terrifying not because it means we lack intelligence, but because it cracks this mask, wide open. To admit we're wrong is to expose ourselves as imperfect, to let others glimpse the chaos behind the performance. And that, for the ego, feels like death. Think about how we react when someone challenges us. Rarely do we pause and say, "You might be right. Let me rethink." Instead, our defenses ignite like fire. We argue, we justify, we twist facts, we grasp at anything to protect the fragile sense of self we've constructed. Why? Because being wrong doesn't just question our ideas, it threatens our identity. If I'm wrong, then perhaps I'm not as wise, not as capable, not as admirable as I believed. The ego cannot tolerate this collapse, so it fights with every weapon it has. Jung would say that the ego is not inherently bad. It helps us navigate society, structure our ambitions, and build our lives. But the danger lies in mistaking the mask for the person. The ego is brittle. It must always appear unshaken, always in control. And when reality threatens to shatter it, our instinct is to deny, deflect, or attack. This is why so many intelligent people cling to falsehoods long after evidence has disproved them. They're not defending truth. They're defending their mask. You've probably experienced this yourself. Maybe in a heated debate, someone pointed out a flaw in your reasoning. Even if part of you knew they were right, you felt a rush of defensiveness. That sting wasn't just about logic. It was about identity. To be wrong meant being seen as weak, as foolish, as less. And so, like most of us, you pushed back, even if later you admitted the truth silently to yourself. Here lies the tragedy. Our obsession with protecting the mask keeps us from growing. Every time we shield the ego from being wrong, we trade short-term comfort for long-term stagnation. Jung warned that the soul withers when it clings to illusion. To protect the mask is to imprison the self. But here lies the opportunity as well. When we allow the mask to crack, when we admit wrongness with humility, we discover something paradoxical. The ego doesn't actually die. Instead, it transforms. Each time we face wrongness honestly, the mask becomes less fragile, less artificial. We become more real, more resilient. Jung would remind us that true strength is not in appearing flawless, but in embracing our flaws openly. So ask yourself, are you protecting the mask or strengthening the soul? When someone is called stupid, the insult stings, but it doesn't cut to the bone. Stupidity can be explained away. A lack of knowledge, poor education, limited experience. It's something external, almost impersonal. We can shrug and say, well, that's just how they are. But being wrong, that's different. Wrongness is not a lack, it is a revelation. It shows that we had the knowledge, the intelligence, the tools, yet still failed. And that failure unmasks something deeper, something Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the collection of everything we don't want to admit about ourselves. The selfishness, the envy, the pride, the blind spots. It lurks in the unconscious, shaping our actions without our awareness. Wrongness pulls the shadow into the light. It says, here is the arrogance that kept you from listening, the bias that skewed your judgment, the insecurity that demanded you be right at all costs. And this is why being wrong feels unbearable, because it isn't exposing stupidity. It's exposing our shadow. Think about the last time you realized you were wrong in a meaningful way. Not about the weather or a trivia fact, but about something central, perhaps a belief, a relationship, a judgment of someone's character. Did you feel shame? Did you feel defensive, even angry? That reaction was your shadow resisting exposure. It wasn't about the facts. It was about protecting the image you hold of yourself. Wise, fair, moral, perceptive. Wrongness shattered that illusion, if only for a moment. This is why many of us find it easier to accept stupidity than wrongness. If I am stupid, it is something outside my control. If I'm wrong, then the flaw is within me, in the parts I'd rather keep hidden. Stupidity can be excused. Wrongness demands confrontation. Jung believed that until we face our shadow, we remain fragmented, half alive. To deny wrongness is to deny ourselves the chance to see what lives in the dark corners of our psyche. And the shadow does not vanish simply because we refuse to look. It grows stronger, manifesting as projection. We see in others the very faults we cannot face in ourselves. That's why people who fear being wrong often attack others as liars, fools, or hypocrites. They are not really describing others. They are describing their own disowned shadow. But here is the paradox. Wrongness, while painful, is one of the most direct paths to self-knowledge. When we admit it, we gain access to the shadow. We begin to integrate those hidden parts instead of letting them control us from the dark. To be wrong, honestly and humbly, is not a humiliation but a doorway. The shadow revealed becomes the shadow transformed. So the next time you are wrong, don't rush to cover it. Ask instead, what part of myself has just been exposed? That is where your shadow waits for you. Every human being carries a secret hope that our beliefs, our worldview, our values are solid ground. We want to believe that the way we see the world is not just personal preference, but truth itself. To be wrong threatens that foundation. It shakes the ground beneath our feet, and in that tremor, Jung said, we encounter something most people will spend their lives avoiding: self-confrontation. Think about how unsettling it feels when a long-held belief begins to crack. Maybe you defended a political stance only to later learn it was built on misinformation. Maybe you swore you knew a person's character only to discover they were hiding something dark. Maybe you clung to a certainty about life only for experience to humble you. In each of those moments, you don't just question the belief, you question yourself. If I was wrong about this, what else might I be wrong about? That question can feel like a bottomless pit. Most people never allow themselves to fall into that pit. Instead, they double down. They argue harder, shout louder, and cling tighter to the belief that is already cracking. Why? Because to admit wrongness is to admit fragility. It is to confess that our convictions are not absolute, that the ground beneath us is shifting sand, and the ego despises instability. Jung warned that refusing self-confrontation is one of the greatest dangers to the psyche. The person who never questions themselves may appear confident, even strong, but inside, their foundation is hollow. They build higher and higher towers of certainty, but all it takes is one earthquake of truth to bring it crashing down. In contrast, the person who faces wrongness learns to rebuild on stronger ground. They discover that beliefs are not monuments but tools useful only until they fail to serve truth. There is a paradox here. While admitting wrongness feels like weakness, it actually makes us more resilient. Each time we confront our errors honestly, we loosen the grip of illusion. We discover that our value does not depend on being right all the time, but on being willing to keep growing. Jung believed this confrontation is not optional. It is the path of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. So the next time you feel the sting of wrongness, pause. Resist the instinct to defend or deny. Ask instead, what part of me is afraid to face this truth? That discomfort is not your enemy. It is the invitation. Self-confrontation is painful, yes, but it is also the only way to transform. When you discover your beliefs are not absolute, you haven't lost yourself. You've found the courage to evolve. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. Certainty is celebrated, while doubt is mocked. The charismatic leader who speaks with absolute conviction wins followers even when their ideas are shallow. The politician with a catchy slogan triumphs over the one with nuance. The influencer who confidently declares the truth goes viral, while the thoughtful skeptic is ignored. Society doesn't reward the person who says, "I might be wrong." It rewards the one who says, "I'm right, and no one can question me." Carl Jung would have seen this as more than cultural habit. It is collective psychology at work. Societies, like individuals, fear uncertainty. We crave the comfort of leaders and systems that promise stability, even if that stability is an illusion. Certainty acts like a drug. It soothes our anxieties. It simplifies complexity. It gives us a sense of control. But just like a drug, it comes with dependency. We become addicted to the feeling of being right, even if it blinds us. Doubt, on the other hand, is dangerous in the eyes of society. The one who doubts slows down the machine. They ask uncomfortable questions. They disrupt the chorus of agreement. And because of this, they are often labeled weak, disloyal, or even traitorous. History is full of examples. Thinkers, whistleblowers, reformers who were ridiculed, imprisoned, or silenced, not because they were wrong, but because they dared to question the certainty of the majority. But here is the irony. Doubt is not destruction, it is creation. Every leap forward in human history began with someone brave enough to say, "What if we're wrong?" Science thrives on this principle. Philosophy is built on it. And yet, in our daily lives, society pressures us to bury our doubts, to pretend we're sure even when we're not. The child who questions is told to stay quiet. The employee who challenges authority is warned to conform. The friend who hesitates is accused of being indecisive. Slowly, we learn to wear certainty like armor, even as it imprisons us. Jung believed that this cultural reward system reinforces the ego's worst instincts. It teaches us to avoid self-confrontation at all costs. We fear being wrong not only because it threatens our identity, but because we know society will punish us for it. To admit wrongness is to risk shame, rejection, exclusion. And yet, this is precisely what makes the act of admitting wrongness so radical. In a world that glorifies certainty, humility becomes rebellion. The challenge, then, is to resist society's script, to see doubt not as weakness, but as strength, to remember that certainty is easy, but wisdom is difficult. Every time you admit uncertainty, you are not losing ground, you are breaking free from the prison of blind conformity. And so, Jung reminds us of a truth we spend our lives trying to avoid. Wisdom does not come from being right, but from daring to be wrong. Every mistake is a mirror, every wrong turn a message from the shadow, every doubt a doorway into deeper self-knowledge. The question is, will you run from it, or will you face it? Because in the end, the fear of being wrong is only the fear of meeting yourself, and meeting yourself is the beginning of freedom. If this journey into Jung's thought has opened something within you, remember to subscribe for more insights like this. Until next time, be brave enough to confront your shadow.